Declare a winner in Minnesota's 2008 U.S. Senate election. More than a year after Senator Al Franken took the oath of office, claims of voter fraud continue. This week, Governor Tim Pawlenty said that felons voting illegally may have tipped the scales in favor of Franken. The state Republican Party is asking every county to look into these claims. Dan McGrath is the head of Minnesota Majority, the conservative research group that says it has proof that felons voted. Here too, why Spano. Spano is writing a book about the 2008 Senate election. He heads up the Center for Political Advocacy at UMD. Well, Mr. McGrath, what is the evidence that there were felons voting in large numbers?
Well, I brought just a quick example here. Court record, registration card, signed roster page. So we zeroed in on these by comparing electronic lists between the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension and the statewide voter registration system after the election. That initial match spit out 2,803 names, and then we started examining closer, looking for the court records to show they were on felony probation, looking for the signature on the roster page to make sure that we have good data. And what we found is probably over 1,000 prosecutable instances, and in Hennepin and Ramsey we forwarded 1,300 total names. We just gave them the whole list, figuring they've got access to better data than we do. So. You're
writing a book on the subject.
I am.
What about this possible fraud?
I should say that the publisher, I think, is disappointed in the book because Minnesota had to come to the conclusion it was the most accurate, best recount ever done in the United States. Also the largest hand recount, almost 3 million votes. It's the only time it's been done, and Minnesota is really the only place that you could do it because of the way we do the election system.
But isn't it possible, Dr. Spano, that that some of these folks could have been missed? I mean, it's kind of hard,
sure.
Don't you think?
Happens every year, happens all the time. Unfortunately, Minnesota Majority said in 2009 that there were 400,000 more voters, total tallied, than people actually voted. They compared the list. Unfortunately, they forgot the 8th district. And so that would have been huge voter fraud, but their credibility kind of leaves a lot to be desired. They also said there are 2,800 dead people who voted. They turned up 5 that they gave to the all turned not to be dead. They're not credible.
400,000 was absolutely a database error that we had. We corrected that mistake. The discrepancy remains at 40,000.
And at least at UMD, you don't get to do more research until you get folks who can get that stuff right.
What's a way to prevent, if it is happening, and if there's 1 or 2 felons voting, that's too many, is there a way to prevent this?
Well, absolutely. What's supposed to happen is and this is a same-day registration, so this isn't a very good example, but on the pre-printed roster pages, it should say challenge felon if they're a known felon. But the system broke down. In 90% of the pre-printed roster pages that we looked at, there was no challenge notation on them.
Do you buy the fact that this could have tipped? I mean, do you base did the governor base his comment that it could have tipped it to Franken on where these votes were found?
Well, first of all, our report doesn't say anything about Franken. He's not even mentioned in the report. What it says is we found that felons voted. And some people have kind of connected the dots and said, well, maybe this means that Franken wasn't legitimately elected. That's not the point we're trying to make. The point we're trying to make is there's a problem, break down the system. We're trying to get it fixed before the upcoming 2010 election.
And you're not buying the argument there's even a problem?
No. Yes, there is a problem.
Okay.
The problem is a guy goes into the joint, right? He comes out, he's still on, as they say, paper, which means probation, parole, something. He's not supposed to vote during that period. We passed a law in 2009 requiring that judges tell them that they can't do that they sign a piece of paper. Pawlenty vetoed this. Passed 118-9. Pawlenty vetoes the way we could get after
things in it, though. That was one good thing.
No, that bill was off by itself. That piece of the bill was off by itself, and he vetoed it all because he said judges shouldn't spend this much time. There's been no effort on his part to do anything about this. Now, what we should do, the easiest thing to do, is to just let everybody who's not in prison vote. In Vermont, for example, everybody gets to vote, whether they're in prison or not. The idea that we should all keep these people away, the voting is one thing that makes them part of the community. That's a great deal.
What do you make of that?
Well, no, I disagree. Deprivation of your rights is part of your punishment. And while you're serving your sentence still on probation, you shouldn't be eligible to vote. Now, Minnesota is pretty liberal about this. A lot of states, you don't get your rights back ever unless a court specifically orders it. Here, you get your rights restored as soon as you're finished serving your sentence.
Au contraire, in over half the states, you get to vote when you're not in prison. In over half the states. So, you know, it's something we could do. But absent that, yes, there's a problem. There is no list. That's the problem. There's no magical list that somebody can look up and say, aha, here's the felon who's now gone. No, there isn't. That court data list is no good. You know that. Everybody knows that. And we're not allowed, again, the governor vetoed the ability for the Secretary of State's office to use the DOC list, which is much better.
On at least 3 different occasions that they're not supposed to vote before they show up at the polls. Right at the top of the roster page, it says, by signing this, I certify that I'm not a felon under supervision. It says that on the voter registration card. It says that on the parole agreement they sign when they get released.
Can I ask you, why are you doing this now? I mean, the 08 election's over, the recount's been done. I know another election's coming down.
We've been trying to get attention on this for a long time. We've been working with the county, attempting to work with the county prosecutors in Hennepin and Ramsey County, and they've been completely non-responsive. We forwarded all of our data on this research to them 8 months ago. Well, 8 months ago we gave them 1,300 names, and they're really dragging their feet now in September. All of the election records from 2008 will begin to get shredded. They're going to be destroyed because they're only retained for 22 months after an election. So anything that's not caught and prosecuted by then, forget about it. So we're just trying to tell them, you got to pick it up, you know, get working on this so we don't have this problem going on in 2010.
So for those of us who are kind of suspicious, should we believe that this isn't related to your original goal as an organization, which is anti-gay marriage and abortion stuff? I mean, you came to this a couple of months before the 2008 election. Isn't that what you're doing?
Before the 2008 election, we found problems in the voter rolls and asked Mark Ritchie to address them. He seems to have failed to do that.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming down.
Thanks for the discussion.
Thank you.